Good morning. We today begin the book of Joshua. The first 5 books of the Bible are known as the Pentateuch. Starting with Joshua, we begin the books of the Old Testament that are called the historical books. And it's Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, and Nehemiah are grouped into that historical books. Not to say that Genesis and Exodus aren't books of history, the story of the Israelites. They are, very much so. But these next group of books that we're going to spend, quite a bit of time on, really, are the history. And they're not in exact sequence, and we're going to be hearing same stories, different times, different places. But through it all, we're going to see God interacting with his people and God being faithful to his people. And some of the history of these books has been proven by different archaeological digs, different things that way. And other parts of this history, people will say yet today that, there's no proof of any of that. How could that happen? And we're going to find one of those things in this reading today as we read and get into the people of Israel crossing into the promised land. As we finished the book of Deuteronomy, Moses had gone up on the mountain and had died. And I didn't mention yesterday, but just as when Aaron died, the Israelites spent 30 days mourning the death of Moses. And as Joshua begins, it says, after the death of Moses, the Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun. And so the first part of chapter 1 is God speaking to Joshua, reminding him that he is the chosen leader, that God will be with them. And verse 5, he says to Joshua, no one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. And these are words that God speaks to each and every one of us every day. I will not fail you. I will not forsake you. I won't desert you. I will be with you in and through all things. What a wonderful promise. In verse 7, God says, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to act in accordance with the law, be strong and courageous. And then again, verse 9. I love verse 9, and it's one that I memorized and had assigned for confirmation verses. And it says, not the first part, but, so God says to Joshua, I hereby command you. And then here is the confirmation verse and the great spot. Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. When we go into the darkest times of our lives, and I'm thinking, I have a funeral this afternoon for a 20-year-old, and this is a dark time in the life of our community and in the life of this young man's family. And even in these darkest times, God wants us to know and remember, I am with you. Be bold and be strong, be courageous, no matter what comes. Trust and know that God is with you, no matter where you go. And hard words, or hard places to be, but good words of promise. Sometimes very hard to hear and to understand and to believe. And then so Joshua has had this conversation with God. God is encouraging him. God is, saying, I am with you. You're going to lead the people and you're going to be good at it. And this is positive reinforcement. I will be with you. I will help you. You will be good at it. Even though sometimes we feel so inadequate, when we rely on God to help and to lead and to guide, we find that we can do so much more than what we ever imagined. So Joshua and God have had the conversation, or Joshua has listened to God, and Joshua then speaks to the people. And in verse 16, the people answered Joshua, all that you have commanded us, we will do. Whatever you send us, we will go. Just as we obeyed Moses, we will obey you. And then this, may the Lord God be with you as he was with Moses. The people knew that Moses had been led by God. They could see in Moses God. And so here, their prayer for Joseph is that God will be with him as well, just as God was with Moses. And think about Moses in the Bible. Think about Joshua in the Bible. I'm not sure how much you know about these guys, but God led and guided them. And he does that for you and for me as well. He doesn't abandon us. I will not leave you. I will not forsake you. Promises from God. And so after the 30 days of mourning for Moses and God's conversation with Joshua, and Joshua encouraging and speaking to the people, he says, now is the time that we're going to cross over the river Jordan and inherit and come to live in the land that God has promised to us. And so one of the first things that Joshua does in verse 2, chapter 2, sends 2 spies into the land. It says, man sent secretly from Shittim as spies, saying, go and view the land, especially Jericho. And you've maybe remember the song, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and we're going to get to that in a while. But so these 2 spies go, and they seek the help of a prostitute. What? A prostitute? Why would they, but God works in and through people that we are so surprised at sometimes. And that's, I would guess that there are people that are surprised that I'm a pastor. They knew how I grew up. They knew me as I was growing up. And, surprise, here I am, quite a few years later. But, so God is working through this prostitute. These spies go to her somehow, and she's hiding them in her house. And people from the town of Jericho are sent. The king of Jericho sends people to her house because it's been reported that they're staying there. And she hides them. She hides them up on the roof of her house and says, no, they snuck out the gate just as the gate was closing. You better send some men to pursue them, Sends them on a wild goose chase, that we would call it today. And then she goes and she talks to the 2 spies who are on her rooftop, and she lives on the outside city wall. And the way these walls were built and the cities were built, there was a window in her that looked out to the countryside. And so she let these 2 spies down to the ground on a rope, and she had requested from these 2 men, we've seen God. We've seen the way God led Moses. And so here these people know Moses, know Joshua. They know the people of Israel. They know the God of Israel. And they know that this God is real and faithful and powerful. She says, we have seen how God delivered these other lands and these other peoples into so that you have taken their land and everything. That we see the faithfulness of God. And so when you come to conquer this land, to conquer Jericho, I ask of you one thing, this prostitute says, that you will spare me and my mother and my father and my family, because I know that God is going to lead you and you will be successful in taking over Jericho and all of this land. And these men say to her, when that time comes, when we come to capture, when we come to take over, put this crimson rope in your window. Have your mom and your dad and your family all in your house, in your room. And when they are there, they will be safe. And after the men have been let down, and she ties this crimson cord in her window so that it is there for the people of Israel to see when they come in their conquest. And when that time comes, we're not going to get into that today, but when that time comes, the men are faithful to their promise. Because in chapter 2, verse 21, she says, according to your words, so be it. She set them away, and they departed, and she tied the crimson cord in the window. She's trusting in their word. She's preparing for the future. And I don't know if there's any significance to the crimson cord other than that, it's going to stand out. It's going to be visible. But she trusts in the word of these men, just as she trusts in that their God is faithful to them. It just kind of makes me wonder, when all of this ends, does this woman become a believer, a follower of God as well? I mean, I don't know, we don't, but it's just a wonderful story of how God uses people that we may not expect that God would use. And God works in places that we wouldn't always expect either. So chapter 3 is Israel crossing over the Jordan into the promised land, the beginning of that. So chapter 3 starts, early in the morning, Joshua rose and set out from Shittim, and with all of the Israelites, Shittim, I guess they say it that way, it's whatever. And God's words to Joshua are that have the priests carrying the ark. And when, in verse 8, when you come to the edge of the water of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan. Joshua and the priests carrying the ark get to the Jordan River, they get their feet in the water, and they stand still. And what happens? What happens? Verse 13, when the soles of the feet of the priests who bear the ark of the Lord of all of the earth, will rest in the waters, and the waters of the Jordan flowing from above shall be cut off. They shall stand as a single heap. So here again, just like with the crossing of the Red Sea, as the people fled from captivity in Egypt, and God parted the waters of the Red Sea, God here parts the waters of the Jordan. And verse 14, the people set out from their tents to cross the Jordan. The priests bearing the ark were in front. And this is the time of the year, it says, when the Jordan was overflowing its banks, flooding, springtime. We're into that season right now. I just saw there are some roads that water was going over them yesterday, and we experienced those things. So here the river Jordan is not just the normal natural river, but it's overflowing its banks. It's running over full. And the priests get their feet in the water, and the water backs up, and a huge wall of water, and the water flows off, and the whole community of Israel crosses over. You can't see my arms when they're fully outstretched, sorry. But the whole community of Israel crosses over. The last verse of chapter 3, the Lord stood on there's a covenant stood on the dry ground in the middle of the Jordan until the entire nation finished crossing over the Jordan. Again, God showing his faithfulness in leading his people. And God does that for every day for each and every one of us. May you know and feel and trust in God's guidance, because he's always there for each and every one.